The night had begun with a very good day. 3 new students had come to join the dojo that night, all eager to learn the martial arts, judo, and kickboxing. I was a pro in all 3, having been trained since I could walk by my father. I think he always knew what I would become, the bloodlust in me, he called it. And at the age of 18, there wasn't a fighter in the entire city that could take me. I wanted more than the dojo and the silly one-sided competitions. The nationals had been my answer, my salvation, but my father made sure I never got in, despite being the most talented. I never went to the nationals because I beat a man to a pulp during one of my father's organized tournaments. He had blown his whistle for the match to stop, but I had not heard it, so I continued. And in his will, he passed the dojo to his best student, Sophia, which was also my girlfriend. We ran the dojo together during the day, and at night I wore a tracksuit and concealed my identity with my motorbike helmet. I was a vigilante, and that helped me stay in school. Every night, there was a crime being perpetrated, and I always found them before the cops. There was no holding back with thieves, robbers, muggers, or murderers. My hands were my instrument in the wrath of justice. The newspapers knew me and the police didn't bother. I was making their jobs easier. The city was safe because of me. Many times, I wished my father was alive to see what I had become, the hope and safety that I alone symbolized. But he would not have appreciated it anyway. He didn't see the world for what it was, dark and dangerous to the weak. As was usual, I kissed my girlfriend goodnight at her doorstep and headed home, where awaiting me was a radio receiver. And there I waited, dressed in my tracksuit and my helmet in hand. My hands were ready for battle, wrapped in ropes that made my punches harder and deal more impact. It was a slow night. Perhaps that should have made me happy that I was scaring bad people off the streets, but it didn't. I needed something, someone to hit. The night was about 10 o'clock when I heard the radio crackle to life.
Robbery in progress at Peru's. All officers in the area. Suspects are armed and dangerous.
I locked up my doors and headed out on my bike. The city was mapped out as clearly as the layout of my house in my head. I knew all the routes and shortcuts. The usual police response time was about 15 minutes, and I would always beat them to the scene, or perhaps they just let me. I parked outside Peru, the restaurant. It was the best pizza joint in the city, and it angered me that someone would want to steal from a place so pure. It was the soul of the neighborhood. The robbery was clear from outside. There were 2 men and 2 guns pointed at Leonardo, Peru himself. I could take them. I knew it. Picking up one of the chairs for guests who liked the sun while munching on pizza, I walked into the restaurant casually. In my short vigilante career, I'd realized that a show of confidence did go a long way. "Who are you?" The guns were suddenly turned to me, just like I wanted them. "It's the bike man, the vigilante," the sidekick replied to his partner. The leader laughed and trained his gun at me with intent. There was barely 4 meters between us. "Well, let's see if he bleeds," he said as he pulled the trigger. A core lesson my father always taught was anticipation. I threw the chair at both of them before he fired. I was already on the move. As anticipated, they would dodge the chair, moving away to either sides of the chair. I went for the sidekick on the left, tackling him quickly and pulling the gun from his hand. I rammed his hand into his face, busting his nose, and then turned to face his partner who already had a gun pointed at me. "Drop the gun," he told me. I looked to Leonardo, who was frozen where he was, his hand still in the cashier's drawer. "Go," I told him, but he didn't move. He was one of the weak. Without people like me, they would all perish. You drop it, I told the robber. I swear I will shoot you and the old man. Slowly, I turned the muzzle up and lifted the gun above my head. In the off chance that we did end up shooting one another, I wasn't sure I would hit. Okay, I said, stalling him. Like most criminals, they fidgeted when they were faced with adversaries. It often seemed that they never planned that far ahead. Cops, I said, and he turned away only for a moment, and I threw the gun hard at his face, and it knocked him backwards. I lunged at him and hit him with a spinning kick, and he turned and fell like a log of wood. You still here? I asked the sidekick on the ground. He jumped to his feet and ran out of the restaurant, and I walked up to Leonardo and put a hand on his shoulder. Everything's okay now. You're safe, I said to him, but he only shook his head, staring beyond me at something in the distance. I turned around and saw a man in a black raincoat sitting across from us. I opened my mouth to speak, and then he was gone. Warm breath I felt against my neck as I turned to see him next to me. I was perplexed, but my years of training had instilled instinct in me. My body went into autopilot, and I struck him hard across the face, but he didn't flinch. I tried grabbing his collar, pulling him towards me, but he was gone again from my side. Back in the seat, staring at me through those deep blue eyes. For the first time, I knew fear, and I felt weak. It seemed almost a hallucination, but he had come up next to me and then gone back to his seat in a matter of seconds. I'd not even caught his movement. My body shuddered out of control. For all my eagerness to start brawls, this was one fight I wasn't interested in. So I did something I had never done before. I turned and I ran. Quick into the night, I ran and mounted my bike. I looked back and he was still there on his seat watching me with a passive look. He had always been there all along during the robbery and the issuing fight and had said nothing or did nothing. He had not attacked me, and yet he instilled a great fear in me. Speeding off on my motorbike, I looked back and he was still there, seated and looking at me. The insides of my helmet seemed to get too hot for me, but I couldn't take it off. It was rule number 1. Never lose your mask. The further I rode, the calmer I became. Perhaps he didn't want anything to do with me. I wished. My mind pulled up the city's map, and I thought of routes through which I could shake him off before I got back home, lest he wanted to follow. Suddenly, I heard a whistling behind me, and I turned. The streets were bare. There was no one. I turned, and there he was, right in front of me, the man in the raincoat. He was so close for me to break, but then the part of my mind that wasn't frozen with shock kept my hands on the handle of the bike and continued, hoping to ram him. Faster than I could follow with my eyes, I fell forwards off my bike. I rolled to my back, ready to meet any attack, but there was none. He stood next to my bike, or what was left of it. I hadn't seen it happen, but I knew he must have crushed it with his bare hands. He held nothing in them. Raising his hands, he waved for me to run. I didn't want to, but I had lost all my resolve to fight. I knew he would catch me easily if I ran, but there was no other choice. So I got up and I ran. My legs were growing weak. He was there at every turn, mocking me and mocking my weakness in his silent blue gaze. An alley was my only option. I looked back and there he was, leaning into the shadows and watching me. There was a fire escape in front of me, but I knew he would cut me off before I could reach it. Fight me if you want to. I'm tired. I turned and yelled at him, but he was silent. His only response, that he understood my words, was that he came out of the shadows and faced me. He waved for me to approach him, but there was no way I could win. A fight with him was going to mean my death. Getting no response from me, he started to walk towards me, causing me to back away from him. Suddenly, I tripped and fell, but it wasn't onto the ground. It was deeper, deeper, and deeper, and I fell into a hole that had never been there before. It was a long fall before I landed onto a bed of foam. Trying to stabilize my senses, I could still hear the echo of my screams from the height I had fallen. And looking up, the dark sky was gone, and all I could see was a hatch. Bursts of light shot at me from all sides, blinding me. There was no telling where I was, but I doubted it was safer than being up there with the freak in the raincoat. I heard the burst of gas make its way toward me. There was no way to cover my nose without removing my helmet, and as the gas slipped into my helmet, I felt the world start to spin around me. It spun so fast that I fell. The lights disappeared and hands took me up, leading me deeper into the hole. I tried to stay awake, tried to fight, but my body wasn't responsive to me. We came into a large, lighted room with a lot of people with face masks and white lab coats, regarding me as I was dragged along. Behind them was a large screen displaying a large animal. I could not tell what it looked like, for my vision was hazy. I was led into a corridor, a long, dark corridor, which only terminated into darkness. They turned to me to the left, and I heard a ding sound before the wall gave way and I was tossed inside. My body ached from the fall and my skin was irked by the chill, but I could not move. And there on the floor, I fell asleep as I had been dropped. My eyes fluttered open, and I asked myself if it was the morning. The concept of time was lost on me wherever I was, underground. Where am I? I asked, but none of the four figures hovering over me paid me any heed. Trying my hands, I felt my fingers and toes obey me, and then I began to plan the coming battle. I could take the four, I thought, 3 men and a woman. Moving my right foot for a kick at the nearest man, I realized that I was bound to the bed. He's awake. Good. That is impressive, the woman said as one of the men scribbled in a notepad. Where am I? I kicked and reached, but it was no use. I was tied up pretty well. The extraterrestrial research, the scribbler answered. The government? I asked, and they all laughed in unison. Their laughter lasted longer than I had expected. No, the government cannot fathom what we have achieved here. Not yet, the woman said. She seemed to be the authority amongst the 4 lab coats. There was an air of aristocracy about her facial expressions and laughter. You seem fit enough and mentally also. Your stamina. He ran about 3 kilometers without stopping, maybe more. The raincoat man appeared at the foot of the bed, staring at me as he had the night before. He had chased me here, I realized. All the mind games, the toying, was all to bring me there. To the underground science lab to be a lab rat. The theory puzzled me. What do you want with me? I asked them. They were still taking a moment redeeming their composures after the man in the raincoat had appeared. Agent 4 here is the most successful experiment from this facility. Studying him further, we realized the prior subjects were not as strong as he was, nor were their minds as strong. You, Mike, Apollo. I tried to keep a straight face, but it was no use. They knew. Are a black belt in more than 3 different combat techniques. They closed the book they read my credentials out of. "You are the perfect specimen," the woman told me. "You can't do this to me. People will come looking for me," I assured them, but even I was shaky about my words. "Your girlfriend? We could have her come see you if you want." I lay calmer on the bed. My mind could recognize a threat when it came across one. A scream. The sound came into the room. No one seemed bothered about it until it came louder the second time, and the lab coats looked to the man in the raincoat, and he was gone from the room. The procedure would be another scream, and it was louder this time. There were multiple screams from multiple people. The man in the raincoat suddenly stopped at the door, panting and pale-faced. "Run," he yelled before zooming off again. He ran back towards the source of the screams, and suddenly everywhere was silent. The lab coats looked to one another as they walked slowly towards the door left ajar. Another scream. A sharp and short scream came from the woman before her head flew past my face and crashed against the wall, falling behind me. To me, it seemed like the men in the lab coats were dancing and holding cups of red fluid, which spilled as they moved, but it wasn't so. Something really fast was killing them, and I could not make it out. I struggled against my shackles, but it was in vain. Moving my weight, I succeeded in tilting my bed over until I was swinging face down, close to the floor. There was silence all around me, nothing from the doctors except for soft footsteps that approached me. I looked to my left, not breathing as I saw the feet of the loose killer. It wasn't human, it wasn't feet at all. It seemed like a big snake. I yelled as the bed was lifted along with me. I heard a loud hiss and felt the bed break in two, with only my body holding the two broken parts together. I was raised higher and my face came to meet that of a large serpent with deep blue eyes. Experiments, extraterrestrial research, lab coats, and the raincoat men. It all made sense too late. The serpent's large blue eyes gouged me. From my height above the ground, I could tell that the snake's torso was about 6 feet, and its crawling length was about 7 feet. Arms grew out of its torso, with which it held the bed apart. Its large hand closed around my left thigh with ease, and it yanked it free of my body. It wasn't painful. I passed out. I wished, but it wasn't to be. My nightmare wasn't over. Not yet. Lying on the ground in a pool of my own blood, I opened my eyes and saw a familiar face. Though battered, it was still the raincoat man. He helped me up and together with our 3 legs, staggered out of the room. Where? Those were the only words I could manage as we made it through the corridor. The empty corridor I had been brought through wasn't as it was. The floor was littered with bodies and the walls with blood. I felt the urge to vomit, but I lacked the will. The raincoat man helped me into the room where I had met the lab coats the first time with the big screen. He set me down on the ground and pulled out a keyboard from the round table in the room. I could barely see him from where I lay. I tried turning on the ground so I could have a look when I came to hit a body with my one leg. No, I yelled as I looked into the deep blue eyes of the giant humanoid serpent. Disgusted by me, it turned its gaze to the man in the raincoat. He made some outlandish sounds and kept pointing his finger at me. I didn't speak alien or giant serpent tongue, but I knew he was offering me to the serpent. And the serpent suddenly disappeared, as did the man in the raincoat, and a grunt gave away their location. They were about 10 meters away from me, at the other end of the room. I had not seen each man or alien move, but they had both gotten there. The serpent hissed and grabbed the man's head with his right arm, and the man, yelled, knowing what was coming, as if he felt his skull get squashed slowly against his will. I started to crawl away from both of them. They were closest to the exits from the room, so I moved towards the screen which was the farthest from them. Suddenly, it glowed red, reading the words, "Detonate lab," with the options yes or no glowing under. This was it. The end. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. With one click of a button, I could end the serpent and bring the entire secret lab down, but that also meant me as well. What that meant to truly be a hero. Self-sacrifice. I saw my father standing by the keyboard, bidding me to come closer. He was right as always, I realized. There were so many people above the lab, the entire city which would not be able to defend herself against the alien. I crawled further, biting down on my lips, trying to keep my drowsy eyes open and my arms working. I would listen to my father this once. And crawling towards the keyboard, I heard the man in the raincoat scream, "Cease," and I knew his head was now goo on the wall. I came to the keyboard and dragged myself onto my bottom and tilted the keyboard to face me. As expected, I saw a big red button and a black one at the bottom right corner. I took a deep breath and pressed down yes, ready to die and take all the evil with me. I opened my hands wide as the serpent slid towards me, slowly relishing its prey. Me. A smile spread across my face. I saved everyone. Father sat next to me as we both watched the giant alien come towards us. "Detonation ready. Enter passcode," I heard from behind me, and the lights in my eyes disappeared. I looked to my father and he smiled. His ghostly smile was the last I saw before I was plunged into the darkness. That was death.